Okay, I'm back with part two of the Steve Sarowitz deposition in the Lively versus Wayfarer case. Okay, there is reference here to this being the employee handbook, right? Yes. And do you have a recollection of signing off on maybe not every word of this, but at some point signing off on an employee handbook for Wayfarer Studios? I don't recall. Do you have any recollection of ever seeing this letter is that your name is on here? I don't recall. If you flip through the table of contents on pages Heath 34944 through Heath 34945, have you ever looked at this as you look through the table of contents? Have you ever looked through the policies and procedures that are contained within his handbook? No. Okay. Well, let's look through some of the policies because I think they're quite commendable. On page 4 of the, On page 4 of the document, which is Heath 34946, do you see a reference in the values to Wayfarer Studios being a Baha'i-inspired organization? Okay, here I'm gonna skip down to line 6. Not just anyone would term. So I don't want to broadly say that anything that anyone perceives to be SH would actually be SH, but rather things as in here a condition of an individual's employment. So, in other words, that if someone were to be asked for extra favors, or if someone were to say, like, is very typical in Hollywood, that would be definitely SH. Fair enough, Mr. Sarowitz. If I worked for you and I wanted to understand what's our SH policy, I imagine you would tell me, take a look at this document, right? Objection. I wouldn't be the one answering that question if you were. But I wouldn't be, so it's conjecture. Is it fair to say that if I wanted to understand what Wayfarer Studios' SH policy was, that this is the place I would look? This document is the place I would look to understand that policy? I'm not 100% sure how it would be handled since I don't handle the day-to-day operations. Do you understand that Wayfarer Studios' policy explains that, as read, SH may include a range of subtle and not so subtle behaviors and may involve individuals of the same or different gender. That's from our policy, correct? That's a piece of our policy? Yes. Are you aware of whether anyone on the set of It Ends With Us advised Mr. Baldoni that his behavior was unwelcome? That's too broad a topic. Can you say more specifically what? Do you know if at any time during the filming of It Ends With Us, anyone advised Mr. Baldoni that he had engaged in behavior that was unwelcome? I just can't. It's too broad. You don't know? I wasn't there. I don't have any firsthand, as you said before about the other things. I don't have firsthand knowledge. I wasn't there. Do you have any information at all? Were you ever told that anyone told Mr. Baldoni that he had engaged in conduct that was unwelcome and a request that it be discontinued? Objection to the extent it calls for information you learned from lawyers in which case you are instructed not to answer. You may otherwise answer. Attorney privilege. So you're saying, other than what you've learned from your attorneys, you're unaware of anything? Correct. Other than what you've heard from your attorneys, for example, you never had a conversation with Mr. Baldoni where he told you that someone on the set had told him that his behavior was unwelcome? I don't recall. Do you Are you aware, other than what you've learned from your attorneys, whether any member of the cast or crew ever asked Mr. Baldoni to discontinue a behavior or type of conduct on the set? Other than what I learned from my attorneys, I'm not aware of anything. Okay. You've never seen anything from Wayfarer's own documents or your own text messages? I don't recall. That's outside of what I talked about to my attorneys. Okay, so you don't know any one way, I guess, or the other. Was there ever a time, again, prior to this litigation, where you learned that someone on the set raised concerns that Mr. Baldoni's behavior was inappropriate during filming. I am not aware of any HR complaints that were raised or any SAG complaints that were raised by his behavior. Well, that's an interesting way of distinguishing the question because that's precisely how your PR people talked about it to the press. So, my question to you, sir, was not about HR complaints or SAG complaints. Okay, so my question to you was whether, and I will reread it if I can find it. My question was whether you ever became aware prior to this litigation of anyone on the set raising concerns that Mr. Baldoni's behavior during the filming was inappropriate. I don't recall. Do you see if is it fair to say that under the Wayfarer Studios policy that the thing you want your employees to do when they feel like when they have experienced this type of prohibited behavior is promptly advise the offender that his or her behavior is unwelcome and request that it be discontinued? You can answer yes. And what is supposed to happen when an individual follows that policy to the letter? Although I am not responsible for this because I'm not the one actually implementing this, the behavior should stop. That would not be my individual responsibility as an individual. But the reason the policy is written this way is because the hope is by promptly reporting it and asking for the behavior to be discontinued, whoever's doing it will stop, right? I would not be personally involved, but that would be the hope. That's your understanding of the purpose of this policy, right? Yes. And the next section under supervisor and manager responsibility states, as read, if any supervisor or manager becomes aware of a violation of this policy, they are obligated to report the violation to Human Resources Management so Wayfarer Studios can investigate and, if appropriate, take corrective action. Do you see that? Where's that at? In the section entitled Supervisor and Manager Responsibilities. Okay, yes. Did you supervise or manage any people at Wayfarer Studios during the filming of It Ends With Us? No. Did Mr. Heath? Yes. Before Miss Garofalo was your lawyer, right? Yes. You learned about that completely independent of anything that could fall within an attorney-client privilege because you learned about it in 2023, right? Not completely independently. You knew in 2023 that Miss Lively's legal team had sent a list of protections for return to production, and you talked about it with Mr. Baldoni, didn't you? I'm trying to answer this honestly, so give me a second to describe what I think of the list. I believe that Miss Lively sent a list of things that she insinuated we did, which we never did, and that forced us basically, after millions of dollars were invested in the movie, to sign a list of things that we would no more that that we would do no more that were never done as a ploy to take over the movie, which she eventually did. So, yes, I believe that Miss Lively did send a list of demands for her return to work, and we did sign the list, but when we signed it with the understanding that we did not agree that we had actually done those things. What did you do, since you're stating with some amount of conviction that the actions described in that list did not occur and were, as you just said, a ploy? What did you do to satisfy yourself that what you just said is factual? How did you satisfy yourself for those behaviors or activities or compliance or whatever you would like to call them did not occur? As I have stated previously, the two main things that she said about me are complete or partial lies. That is my direct experience. She accused me of being at a scene which I was not at. She said she was scantily clad. An actor who was on the set with her testified she was not, publicly testified she was not scantily clad. And then, throughout the course of this case, the evidence has come out that much of what she said was not true, or partially true, or twisted to make it seem worse. What did you do, since you're stating with some amount of conviction that the actions described in that list did not occur and were, as you just said, a ploy? What did you do to satisfy yourself that what you just said is factual? How did you satisfy yourself Wayfarer Studios will maintain appropriate documentation and tracking to ensure that reasonable progress is made. Yes. Did that happen with respect to what occurred on set and it is with us? The two ways that a formal complaint would, I'm not aware of any formal complaints of any formal reports of any allegations being made either to, as I mentioned before, either to SAG or to HR. So your answer is you're not aware of any investigation of this type referenced on the document with debate number 34949 taking place. I am not aware of any reported allegations. What's a formal report? Typically, again, I'm not an expert in this. I don't manage sets, but what I've been told and what I've learned through this course of this case is that the two options, if there was a, and then it jumps down. Wayfarer Studios will maintain appropriate documentation and tracking to ensure that reasonable progress is made. Yes. Did that happen with respect to what occurred on set and it is with us? The two favors verbal abuse of a sexual nature, commentary of an individual's body, sexual prowess, or sexual deficiencies. Yes. Sexual jokes and innuendos, leering, whistling, or touching, insulting or obscene comments or gestures, display in the workplace of sexually suggestive objects or pictures, and other physical, verbal, or visual conduct of a sexual nature. Is that a good description of what can constitute SH under Wayfarer's policy? That's what the policy says. Do you have any knowledge of whether any conduct of that type occurred on the set of It Ends With Us? I have no knowledge of any of that. Okay, you don't know one way or the other. I have no knowledge of any of that ever occurring. It's my belief that none of that ever occurred on set. Okay, I have no direct knowledge. So if an investigation is not conducted and if an employee believes their complaint is not resolved, what does the policy say the employee or covered person should do? Do you need time to read the policy? Can you point me to that? Take a look at the section that says violations of this policy. Okay, got it. Do you see the paragraph that begins with employees? If employees believes their complaint is not resolved, do you see that? So so you're saying if anything actually occurred, take a minute. Yeah, so I should and read it and then you can respond. I am not aware of any complaints that were not resolved. Complaints describing unwelcome behavior. I am not aware of any complaints that were not resolved. Okay, and can I answer a little bit more? Sure. I believe that after there were no further complaints after the 17 points, so even after very early on in filming, I was not aware of any complaints. I'm not aware of any written complaints, any HR complaints. I'm not aware of any unresolved complaints. Okay, I know there was insinuated, but I am not aware of any unresolved complaints. Are you aware of any investigation that took place into any conduct that took place on the set of It Ends With Us prior to this litigation? I am not aware of any complaints that necessitated an investigation prior to this investigation. I am not aware of any complaints that were not resolved. Complaints describing unwelcome behavior. I am not aware of any complaints that were not resolved. Okay, and can I answer a little bit more? So the answer to my question is no. Then we jump down, and we've already established that there was no investigation of any kind prior to the initiation of litigation in this case. Is that correct? I'm not aware of any event that would facilitate or require an investigation. So as I said before, I'm not aware of any event that would have required investigation. And one thing I forgot to mention before is that we had talked to counsel and there was no event that they felt will require an investigation. Who is we? Jamie and Justin. And I don't really know. I wasn't involved in that conversation. Well, how did you just remember this? I knew it about it before. I had forgotten to say it before. The council that also verified along with our own, there was just there was no need for an investigation, I guess at that time. Then we jump to these expensive things occurred throughout the production. So when these things occurred, I can't tell you exactly when they occurred, but throughout the production, in addition to a lot of stress, in addition to the people being fired. Sorry, go ahead. And this 17-point list essentially served very effectively, in my opinion, and I will give her a lot of credit for this, as essentially a knife to our throat throughout all of this, so she could get away with the crime she got away with. I thought you were involved in the production of the film. Correct. You only visited the set twice, right? Isn't that what your lawyer told Forbes? That's what I told Forbes, and that's what I'm telling you. I only visited the set twice. That's the truth? That is the truth. Well, you used the word we a lot in that speech you just gave. And so, what I'm wondering is, were you involved in the production of this film, or are you using the word we describing Wayfair Studios? I'm using the word we as in the entity Wayfair Studios, of which I'm the majority investor. Not that I was individually involved in any of the actions. Not that I have personal knowledge of any of this. Not that I was involved in any of this personally or have any individual knowledge. However, the effects have hurt the company and myself as an owner of the company in that respect. Ooh, child. What I'm trying to get at, Mr. Sarowitz, is did you, with respect to Miss Lively's allegations and whatever label you want to give to the sort of content of the 17-point list, okay? I don't want to fight over whether they're allegations or claims or whatever they are. But the substance of what was in the 17-point list, did you know anything about the events described from firsthand knowledge? No. Did you know anything about what was described in the document other than what you had learned from Mr. Baldoni? I'm using the word we as in the entity Wayfair Studios, of which I'm the majority investor. Not that I was individual. Is it possible we could review the 17-point list? We're going to get to a document in a minute. But as you sit here today, your understanding of what was happening on the set, which you have testified you weren't there every day, you visited twice, you weren't involved in the production, do you ever recall learning anything about what was going on the set other than from Mr. Baldoni? Yes. What else do you recall? As you sit here, what else do you recall as you sit here today? Sorry. I talked to Brandon Sklenar when I was on set, and he was effusive in his praise for Justin, his directing, Wayfair, how he had been treated in general. So I met with him personally on the day I was on set. Which of the 2 days? The first day I was on set. Okay. My own experience from that day on set was that I did not witness anything untoward, but I would not have. Again, I was only on set twice, so that's what I would know firsthand. Okay, and so you had a conversation you recall from Mr. Scanar, which was very positive about his experience. Effusive, yes. Effusive, your word. And you obviously had conversations along the way with Mr. Baldoni. Is there anything else you can think of as you're sitting here today that any other person from whom you might have learned information about what was happening on set? Yes. Who was that? Jamie Heath. Okay, so you had conversations with Mr. Heath during production? Yes. And did you talk to Mr. Heath and Mr. Baldoni by phone from time to time during production? I don't recall, but I assume so. Oh, Lord, child. Please subscribe for part 3. My own experience from that day on set was that I did